Commercial diving is one of the most lethal professions globally, with an estimated 3 to 10 deaths per 10,000 divers annually in historical periods. This alarming statistic underpins a critical challenge: the profound lack of transparent, centralized data across the industry. We are looking at a vital report from the University of Cambridge that confronts this very issue by analyzing safety, operational standards, and risk management.
That's precisely it, Mia. The Cambridge report, specifically a report on fatalities in commercial diving, highlights a systemic problem. There is no single international database to learn from past incidents. Information is scattered across various government websites, international organizations, and specialist law firms. This fragmentation means companies cannot develop prevention strategies based on updated statistical evidence.
So without this consolidated data, we are essentially blind, repeating historical mistakes. But how broad is this problem? The report must pull its data from somewhere, even if fragmented.
Indeed, the time horizon is remarkably broad and piecemeal. The general statistical period for fatalities covers 1975 to 2014, with specific chart data extending to 2013. Much of the analysis draws from a 2016 study by Francis Hermans, which reviews the preceding 30 years. Yet it also includes recent fatality events from 2015 to 2021 and cites individual incidents as recent as July 2022. It is a mosaic of nearly 50 years of activity.
A mosaic is a good description. But with such historical, sometimes dated information, how can the industry apply these findings to current practices effectively? Surely technology and safety measures have evolved significantly since the 1970s.
That's where the ALARP principle comes in, Mia. As low as reasonably practicable. The report applies ALARP to determine the necessary investment in safety, balancing costs and benefits. The principle dictates that risk must be reduced until the cost of the protective measure is not grossly disproportionate to the benefit in terms of lives saved. It even assigns a conventional value, around £2 million in 2020, to estimate the cost of a fatality, guiding the budget an organisation should invest in mitigation.
£2 million for a human life. That sounds like a stark, almost cold economic valuation. Does this mean companies can decide to simply pay the cost if the preventative measures are too expensive, rather than implementing them?
Not at all. ALARP is not a license to cut corners. It is the pillar of risk management in the UK, a goal-oriented approach rather than a rigid prescription. The term reasonably practicable is crucial here. It is more restrictive than physically possible. It requires weighing the probability and severity of a risk against the sacrifice, time, money, effort needed to mitigate it. There is a strong presumption in favour of safety. Employers must implement measures unless they can prove the cost is grossly disproportionate.
So, the burden of proof rests firmly with the employer to justify not implementing a safety measure. But what constitutes gross disproportionate? Is there a legal precedent for that?
Absolutely. The legal definition comes from the historic Edwards v. National Coal Board 1949 ruling. It states that if there is a gross disproportion between a significant risk and a meagre sacrifice required to avoid it, the employer unequivocally has a duty to intervene. Risk reduction measures must be adopted unless the cost is manifestly disproportionate to the health protection benefit obtained.
That clarifies the legal grounding. But how do you quantify this in practice? How do companies determine that £2 million investment?
The report suggests a three-step quantitative method. First, estimate the individual fatality risk per diver per year. Second, calculate the exposure by multiplying this risk by the total number of divers involved. Third, perform a cost-benefit analysis by multiplying this value by the reference economic value of a human life, which is that £2 million figure.
Can you give me an example of how that calculation plays out for a company?
Certainly. Let's assume a fatality risk of 5 divers per 10,000 per year. The statistical value of this risk amounts to £1,000 for every diver employed annually. This means the organisation must invest more than this £1,000 per employee per year in risk mitigation processes, technologies, training, equipment to comply with ALARP. Over a typical 30-year career, this rises to approximately £30,000 per individual employee. This figure scales proportionally with the number of divers an organization employs.
So it's about a minimum annual investment threshold for each diver, but this still feels like it could be interpreted as a license to save money, as you put it earlier. Does ALARP override basic safety requirements if they prove too costly?
No, it is crucial to understand that ALARP calculations are in addition to legal obligations. Companies are still fundamentally obliged to fund standard good health and safety practices and minimum requirements regardless of ALARP. These include pre-dive planning, hazard assessments, qualified surface teams, and suitable equipment. Those are non-negotiable and represent a substantial cost base for operating legally. ALARP applies to residual risks beyond these minimums.
That's an important distinction. So it is about continuously striving for safer operations, even after meeting the baseline. But what are the most common dangers ALARP aims to mitigate in commercial diving?
The report identifies several key causes of fatality. One of the most lethal is the delta P trap, which is a pressure differential that can cause suction or entrapment in pipes or openings. These are often predictable and avoidable with proper planning, considering tides or hydraulic isolation before a diver enters the water. Then there are human and cultural factors. The average age of victims is 37, suggesting the problem is not a lack of technical skill, but a corporate culture that tolerates protocol violations for cost or timing reasons.
A culture that prioritizes profit over safety, essentially. What are some of the practical dangers these divers face?
Beyond delta P, the umbilical nightmare is common. Many incidents are caused by tangles or damage to the umbilical, which supplies gas to the diver, leading to asphyxia or uncontrolled decompression. Looking at the incident list, we see examples like the 1974 Drill Master incident, where a diving bell lost its weight and rapidly ascended, killing 2 divers, or in 1979, the Wildrake incident, where a diving bell separated from its cable at 180 meters, and the 2 divers inside died of hypothermia. Even inshore work carries immense risks, such as the Hood Canal Bridge incident, where a diver died entangled underwater, his regulator torn off.
These are truly harrowing. And beyond immediate fatalities, what about the long-term health consequences for divers who survive these incredibly dangerous conditions?
Survival does not guarantee freedom from permanent damage. Rapid ascents or defective equipment can lead to conditions like arterial gas embolism, where gas bubbles enter the bloodstream, potentially causing a stroke or heart attack. Barotrauma, injuries from gas expansion in body compartments, can include thoracic squeeze, leading to diffuse alveolar hemorrhage. And of course, decompression sickness, the bends, where nitrogen forms bubbles in tissues. Even following strict tables, the risk persists at 1 to 2 cases per 10,000 dives.
It is a relentless assault on the human body. The report covers global data, but does it offer any insights into specific national contexts?
It does, to an extent. While it doesn't provide a deep dive into national development strategies, Italy is mentioned in the geographical distribution data. Out of the 577 diving fatalities analysed, 15 are attributed to Italy. This places Italy in an intermediate range compared to countries like Belgium with 14 or Brazil with 16, but significantly lower than the UK with 43 or the US with 207, nations with massive offshore industries.
So 15 fatalities for Italy. What can we infer from that figure, considering the limitations of the data?
It confirms that commercial diving is inherently dangerous globally. However, the report does not delve into Italian market specifics, such as its complex legislation or the prevalence of inshore versus offshore activities. The data is also aggregated, so we cannot tell if these 15 fatalities are recent or historical, or if they correlate to the effectiveness of local control systems. What is clear is that Italian workers are exposed to the trade's intrinsic risks, and the report signals an urgent need for a transparent, centralized data collection system in Italy to turn incidents into shared lessons.
That need for data transparency seems to be a consistent theme throughout the report. What is the ultimate vision for the future of the sector, given these dangers and shortcomings?
The report strongly suggests a paradigm shift towards diverless technologies, where possible, inspection and maintenance should be delegated to robotic systems like ROVs to eliminate human exposure. Advanced sensors are also a priority to detect hazards like Delta P before a diver even enters the water. Rigorous international safety protocols need wider adoption, and investigations must be more robust, focusing on management responsibility rather than simply blaming the individual diver. Crucially, organizations must justify safety investments by rigorously following ALARP, backed by shared incident databases.
So the future is safer, more automated, and more accountable. It sounds like a significant cultural shift is needed, beyond just technological upgrades.
Precisely. The investment concerns not only hardware but also corporate culture. A lack of safety-oriented leadership can render even the most technically advanced protocols ineffective.
Safety in commercial diving is not merely a bureaucratic task or a financial transaction. It represents an inalienable ethical duty towards workers and is at the same time a fundamental factor of corporate reputation. Our industry is under constant global observation for the high human, social, and legal costs associated with incidents. Only through transparency, data centralization, the rigorous application of principles like ALARP, and technological evolution can we guarantee a safe future for maritime professionals. If this discussion has prompted you to reflect on safety standards in demanding industries, please consider sharing this episode with someone who might find it valuable.